Well, now this certainly doesn't come up every day as we go through these old series. You know, these days, as in every day of ours, hindsight is always going to be 2020. And when we look back nowadays to those weird fads of the video gaming years, at one time it was the FMV game, other times it was the old VR idea, the exercise games, the games incorporated with action figures, and the bits and bobs and tricks of the trade, but one of those fads that ended up being actually pretty good overall was the rhythm game, capitalized almost entirely by the Guitar Hero franchise, which was a blistering juggernaut in its niche market, that it ended up causing the usual band of tryhards to come out of the woodwork and try to sand off percentages of that market for their own with a frankly wacky pile of plastic crap that tried to add immersion to their rhythm games. Nowadays, the rhythm game is getting more and more tied to action genres, since a bunch of games from now and then have proven that rhythm mechanics tied to a more traditional narrative can be working wonders, but back then it was dominated by the party-styled games trying to hit notes in the right orders for big scores. A bunch of tryhards tried, and like every other fad in this medium, mostly everybody failed to make a mark except for a handful of games that got above the mediocre line, and this craze to jump on the peripheral-fueled nonsense train of the mid-2000s got so much fervor that even the lag-behind Nintendo got in on this action with the DK bongos. Thematically appropriate, if nothing else, peripheral that was basically a giant plastic shell incorporated with 4 buttons. Left, right, start, and clap. As a proud owner of a pair of the now mildew-infested devices, the things were devilishly simple to use, and could be rather addicting to use if you got into a good groove with the signature games that use the device, the DK Conga duology. Since the device was so simple to use, the games provided that classic easy-to-learn, hard-to-master, and some pretty good song lists, and likewise, were at least a slightly successful side project for Nintendo all in all. However, slightly later on, somebody at Nintendo threw out an odd idea at a brainstorming meeting that ended up blossoming undeterred into the subject of today's video: the completely bonkers Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, which was Nintendo's attempt to marry this strange plastic controller to a legitimate platformer on the GameCube. And much like the way earlier Wario World that we talked about on this channel, Jungle Beat is predictably a pretty simple platformer with barely a plot to talk about. I'm not sure if the game was developed in a hurry or not, but the total lack of character across the entire thing is pretty strange, coming a few years after the brilliant Donkey Kong 64, preceded by the equally brilliant DKC trilogy. So seeing a narrative throwback to the days of arcade machines is kinda weird, but Jungle Beat does make up for that lapse with its engaging gameplay. For a device as simple as a thing with 3 buttons on it, Nintendo certainly made good use out of it with high-speed timing challenges, interesting level gimmicks, and actually great visuals. It's definitely an exciting game to be sure, with flying fast across the screen, making those jumps through hazards and spike traps, defeating enemies 10-15 in a row. Jungle Beat can certainly make DK look like an amazing badass, if nothing else. It's just that without any characters or any reason why Donkey Kong is doing any of this beyond collecting bananas and points beyond anything imaginable, Jungle Beat as a game is about as worth remembering as those 3 pancakes you ate for breakfast. It's the classic Nintendo conundrum where they end up building this really fun game with the balanced challenges, the fast-paced creative levels, the cool boss fights that you have with these hordes of creatures, and then the big bad. You remember that you had fun, but then you totally toss out any plot line or interesting characters that round out your experience, and then you can't really remember anything specific from the game that you remember having fun with, and only boil it down to that level that had the bird race, or the one with the bull running down a ski slope, or the one level that was worth committing to memory, Battle for Storm Hill. Compared to Super Mario 3D World, that I can remember some levels beat for beat because some of those levels were really out of the box, the Mario Kart-inspired Sprint Race, the ninja level where it played with pseudo-stealth and shadows, and the camera being actually in the foreground, the battles on Bowser Highway, Jungle Beat just doesn't have the creative brassiness of Nintendo's masterpieces to really make an impact on the memory. The other issue is that since the game has no plot to speak of and does boil down to trying to break the high score table with your amazing gaming prowess, the game technically has no ending either. You unlock levels through the game solely by collecting medals earned in other levels closer and closer to requiring 100% of them to unlock everything, and if you don't want to do that, then you do end the game at a random point on the progression path at an inherently uninteresting boss fight, and then it's either get completioneering or you're just done on the spot with no payoff. Since the game has nothing hooking you to keep going for that 100%, a bunch of people are just gonna dump it right then and there and never think about it again. And that's not to bag on the boss fights that badly, it's just the thing about this game. Actually fighting them can be really fun, but the boss fights aren't unique, and you play this game for any length of time and you'll be seeing near carbon copies of boss fights done 3 or 4 times throughout the time you play it, where there are the Kong fist fights, the bird bosses, the elephant turret sections. It gets monotonous and tedious very quickly to see palette swaps of these guys that do not change their strategies at all, and they're so easily beaten more and more that even though fighting them can be a nice time, there's no satisfaction to it if there's no point to the bosses other than them being an obligation for existing just for a spectacle to last no more than 2 minutes. It gets really frickin' boring. And that's the issue with recommending this game. Yes, it's short and snacky, it has its fun moments, and clearly, you're not going to be taking it with any degree of seriousness since you have to play it with a 5-pound hunk of plastic. But the game gets tiresome with any playtime on it. Even fully completed, this game is not a long venture, maybe taking 7 hours at the most to get 100%. And that's if you really screw up doing those medal chases over and over again. I'm being really generous with that 7-hour time frame is my point. Personally, I played it for less than 5 and got within a stone's throw of endgame content, and past the first couple, you start seeing palette swaps of those unique levels and challenges. And that's when you realize Nintendo really has nothing else to toss at this project, and most likely nothing much beyond that to entice people to keep chasing the challenge to get to the ending. Much like the DK Bongos, Jungle Beat has novelty value only. It's cute to see Nintendo attempting to use this primitive device to try and build a platformer around it, and while it's strangely impressive that they did that, as a game in its own right, Jungle Beat just does not stand up to scrutiny, and a lot of other games will hold your attention a lot better than this odd cousin of the rhythm game Craze. Okay, look, before you all go get your torches and pitchforks, I can see why people remember Jungle Beat and do appreciate it. It's cute, it's charming, and it's really out of the box. But those feelings do not last long when playing this game when you go back to try and play it because you remember it so well. And I could find even a short time with Jungle Beat feeling like it drags heavily, and then you'll be swapping the disc for something that does actually have a story to tell and a way to captivate you long term. If you have literally nothing else to do, then Jungle Beat can provide you with an afternoon's worth of Nintendo branded nonsense, but beyond that, there's really nothing to see here. It's fun and exhilarating for those first couple hours while you're seeing the gimmicks firsthand and flying across the screen, stomping everything in sight and feeling like a complete badass, but it gets repetitive fast, and you'll start wondering why you're bothering to get all the medals. What could the ending be that actually justifies any sort of commitment to this oddball game? So with that in mind, I'm going to move along to the final scoreboard for this game. And leave you all out there with a final victory for gamers. Thanks for watching, and hit subscribe if you're feeling generous to the channel.